or the uneducated swine who are constantly commenting, he pled guilty. Let's go over why someone would plead guilty to get a life sentence over pleading not guilty, getting tried, convicted, and then put on death row. So let's start there. Someone might take a plea deal to avoid a death sentence because it offers a guaranteed outcome, such as prison without parole, instead of risking a trial that would impose the death penalty, essentially. It's important to note there are two different groups: people who were sentenced to death and later exonerated or found not guilty because of their convictions, because they were actually innocent, so it was overturned. People who were executed despite substantial evidence of innocence. These cases remain disputed because the person cannot be exonerated after execution, though many legal scholars and innocent organizations argue some were innocent, like the Innocence Project, which, would we need the Innocence Project if people that weren't guilty were put in prison? No, we wouldn't have a need for an Innocence Project, would we? Since 1973, more than 200 people in the United States have been exonerated and released from death row. Many were convicted by mistaken eyewitness testimony, false confessions, prosecutorial misconduct, unreliable forensic evidence, or jailhouse informant testimony. Now, if you've been following along here, you'll know we covered the Norfolk 4, where 10 different men were incarcerated a total of 42 years for a crime one man named Omar Ballard committed, and later the detective that interrogated them was sentenced to 12 years in prison because he was extorting jailhouse witnesses for testimony, saying that this is the guy, this is your guy. They were getting off on their sentences and innocent people were thrown in prison. Now let's take a look. Look at all of these people who served 9, 16, 10, 11, 18, 30 years, 3 years, 6 years. These are all people who spent decades awaiting execution and then were cleared at the last minute. And how were they found not guilty? DNA proved another man committed the crime. Journalism students uncovered the real unaliver. DNA excluded him and identified another perpetrator. DNA evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. Convictions challenged due to flawed evidence. DNA implicated another suspect, exonerated alongside Henry McCollum. Eyewitness testimony was found unreliable, and prosecutorial misconduct and false testimony was given. Essence, my friends, that is why somebody would take a plea deal, because when you're put on death row, you're put into a tiny cell and left there 23 hours a day. Most people on death row don't get access to many phone calls, they don't get access to visits, and really, once you're on death row, there's no way out. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who are forced into plea deals and take them willingly, because otherwise, who knows when they might put them to be executed. There's a man, the second story in the Framed book is about a janitor who was accused of unaliving this girl from a volleyball tournament. The 3 eyewitnesses said it was him. They were the ones that committed the crime, and guess what? He had 6 weeks to get himself off of death row, and it happened. He was exonerated because a bunch of firms took on the case, and he was released. So yes, people do plead guilty. Until you're on the other side of that interrogation table, you don't know what it's like. I'm an ex-felon who knew to ask for a lawyer, and I still waived my right to a lawyer at the time and gave them the information they wanted, and guess what they did? They didn't give a fuck. They used it against me and told me, if you take this to trial, we're giving you 5 years. So basically it's like, oh, if you challenge our authority, we're going to make it as hard as possible for you. So yes, I had to plead guilty as well, because what? Most states carry a 98% conviction rate. They don't give a fuck if you're innocent. They give a fuck about keeping their conviction numbers and rates up. Okay? And to the other people in the back who say, oh, well, there was evidence left from Bryan Kohberger. Do you know how easy it is to plant a knife sheath? That's like saying you couldn't take this pen, write something down with it, or put a drop of something on it, and then, drop it into the crime scene, and now all of a sudden a man's doing a life sentence for a knife sheath when there were several other male DNAs that were left unidentified at the crime scene. A knife sheath is easily planted. It's not like they found touch DNA from Bryan Kohberger on one of the victims. As I've said before, when he gets out, I do accept apologies in the form of cash and cash only. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and follow along for more.